have a very important panel, and transparency and accountability. These are very heavy words for us and for the panel also. And basically, we are talking about ESG supply chain. Primarily, if we put it a structure, we will basically talk about the ESG supply chain. But before we go there, and before I introduce my panel, we have Ruhana from Cipla, we have Shrinivas ji from Arvind, we have Sriram from Redington, we have Bipin ji from Marico. All of us will try to give you actually a broader view about sustainability, and then we'll go to their specific subjects because they cover virtually every industry which is doing anything on sustainability. So I have been working on environmental issues for 25 years now. I have no sector. Environment is my sector. And I see three great promises which has happened in my 25 years of professional journey. One, that India had a forest cover of 9% in 1947. We have a 17% of forest cover. So let's go for the first time the positive story of this country. It's a very difficult country to govern. It's a large country, huge population, largest population, and sustainability you are going to debate today. So we have gone from 9% to 17. Everything is not that gloomy. We have saved the tiger for the world, and I was personally part of most of those petitions before the Supreme Court, before the Forest Bench. I was standing counsel for Gujarat and for Sikkim for many years in the Supreme Court. I have seen that journey from 2002 to 2014. I'm specifically saying 2014, where from poaching, from stopping the poaching in this country, from saving the soil, from saving the territory of the tiger, which is the indicator species, from making it a mainstream thing for the world to realize that tiger is not a species alone, it saves your entire ecosystem. You have almost tripled their number in last 15 years for the world. That's our second mega contribution. And the third is very current one, which is very important because the government speaks about it all the time. That is our net zero commitment and how non-conventional energy, we are doing unbelievable stuff. I'm not personally very much part of it, so I don't know the details. My panelists will talk a little bit about it. But I believe it's a very sizable story happening there. But these are the earlier two stories for you. And the challenges are the air pollution, the water pollution. I think plastics, we are one of the few countries which have done quite well on plastics in last 3 years on packaging. I was personally part of many such petitions. So I'm quite surprised also. If you go to any country, anywhere, you will see packets all over. In India, even a Redington or Sabjiwala also will discourage you from taking a plastic. So achhi baatein bhi hai, because we always criticize somehow. And with this background, I bring first to Ruhana, and I will ask that to start with healthcare. And you are represent a pharma company, and pharma is our pride in this country. And a lot of interesting stuff is happening. The whole pandemic is survived. You are a sector where you have more chances of putting accountability on sustainability in general. What is the sustainable journey happening in Cipla?
Thank you so much. So for asking me this question. So first of all, I would like to say all large companies have taken big commitments on sustainability, be it net zero or climate related commitments. And the journey or the story is incomplete if we don't have our supply chain on board on this journey. Because to meet targets of any companies, it is very important that your supply chain are also on those board on the journey of that targets. Otherwise, you are not going to meet those targets. Even in the supply chain, we have a lot of MSMEs, though those may be small companies, but aggregated them, they are significant in value. So it is very important to look at this piece of supply chain sustainability. In Cipla, what we have done is we have kind of responsible sourcing and supply chain engagements. And as part of that, we have created and we believe in strongly inculcating that ESG into our supply chain practices. And for that, we have laid down the principles. We have our supplier code of conduct, We also have a supply chain responsible sourcing policy, supply chain sustainability policy, and we want our suppliers to adhere to these code of conduct and policies what we are laying down. It is not just limited to the policies or building the policies and just laying it out there. But also how we can look at handholding these suppliers is a very important aspect. And as part of that, every year we do capacity building workshops for these suppliers, and almost 13% of our procurement spend suppliers, we have done the capacity building this year and handholding of these suppliers. We also believe in local sourcing. So 65% of our procurement spend is through local sourcing. Out of that, 10% is MSME vendors. And we also look at women empowerment or women-led MSMEs and how we can encourage them to be part of our supply chain journey. While saying that, it's also important that we look at because Cipla has taken certain bold and aspirational commitments for 2025, and we might be declaring our commitments for 2030 going forward. So it is very important to look at the decarbonization piece of our supply chain, and how we are looking at the categories of scope 3, and how we are building the awareness of our suppliers on that. Very important that while we take the scope 3 data, while as many companies are facing challenges in reporting this data, and even we are one of them, but we have taken a hybrid approach, and to move to more actual data or supply based data, supply chain data, we need to have suppliers on board on this journey. So we are continuously engaging with them and encouraging them, and almost 10% of our suppliers, we have taken the actual data on for our scope 3.
Okay. So very good initial observations, and I'll come back to you. Shrinivas, I'll come to you. And you are actually in a sector which is such a critical sector when 3-4 aspects are seen. Apparel, if I call it, textile, if I call it. That's a sector where is directly exposed to the ESG supply chain, because you export to across the globe. India is a big nation which exports. And supply chain across the world, whatever new rules, regulations come, directly you interface them. India has not created the supply chain regulations in a very specific manner for your sector. But how you are seeing this both as a challenge, as an opportunity? Also, if you compare yourselves as a textile industry with Bangladesh and Sri Lanka, and how we are perceived internationally as a destination from where sourcing happens, and how as an industry you are responding to it.
Yeah, thank you, Business World, for first of all inviting me for this panel. Actually, so let me just talk in brief in terms of the supply chain. When we talk about textile, it's very diverse and it's very actually long. Unlike any others, where we actually start with factory and end with factory, here we start with the farm and then to the retail, right? So farm to retail. So it goes farm, ginner, spinner, weaver. Then there is cut, sewed, laundry, and finishing, packing, and then shipping it out, right? So it's a huge and varied kind of stakeholders here. So and in fact, in terms of the water, if we talk about the impacts which is there, it is phenomenally high, right? Like almost like 93 billion cubic meters of water is consumed annually, and about which is all close to about 4% of the groundwater consumption which is actually there. And then about 20% of the wastewater is basically ascertained for textiles. So it's a huge impact in terms of that, right? In terms of the waste generated, I mean, a lot of garments which is taken in goes to landfill, right? So a lot of things which is actually associated with textile. But then that's where we come in Arvind, for example. So we're trying to do it very differently and trying to show how it can be done right. So here we are actually there right from throughout the supply chain, right from farm to retail, so our own retail plants as well. And then we are also, as you rightly said, we are sending to Europe and US as well. The regulations are very, very stricter, and we are the first who are actually taking it up and making it up happen. Now, in terms of the farm holdings, which is actually there, India is very small farm holdings, unlike where in the larger countries you have big farm holdings, very easy to control the supply chain. India, it's smaller ones, which is actually there. Here we talk about better cotton where basically we can talk about lower consumption of water. So all these practices are put in place in terms of that. We talk about organic cotton, we talk about regenerative cotton. So it is all about that old practices. It is nothing new. Basically, whatever we're doing now in terms of sustainability, it is what India was doing. Quite everything in all aspects of it was being done earlier, right? In terms of circular economy was something which was there in India far long. So that is what we are trying to do that, practice that, and all through with traceability, right? And then in terms of the manufacturing, when you talk about, of course, when I told a lot of chemicals being used into the system, a lot of water being used, and a lot of energy being used. So what we do differently is basically we don't use any groundwater into the processing. I mean, that's something very, very different. Basically, we talk about ZLD, zero liquid discharge, is something most of them talk about. Tirupur, you talked about that as well. So which takes about 90 to 95% of the water is recycled, but where we talk about is 100%. The reason being, we do that 5-10% additional which we need, we use from sewage, municipal sewage water. Like for example, in our textile mills, we take the sewage from the municipal area and we treat that and use that 5 to 10% as top of water, right? So ZLD will need about 90-95% of recycling. Remaining 5-10% is that. In our apparel factories, what we do is we take it from, we connect with the municipal sewage treatment plants and we put a pipeline and use that top of water. So 100% zero blue water. So that's one aspect of it. And of course, in terms of the processing, when we're trying to do very differently, we are also trying to do technologies where we're talking about waterless dyeing as well, right? So we also focus in terms of dyeing, where basically is a huge usage of water, which actually happens when you use more of water, more of chemicals also go along with that, right? And that much more waste also goes into the waste streams. So we use water in such a way that basically only some of the experiments which is actually happening, where we are trying to use foam as a technology, where we are applying only on the yarn where much required. So it doesn't need water as a thing. As I said, less water, less chemicals. And the chemicals what we use, again, is very, very important to understand. The type of chemicals what we use is basically doesn't have any toxic substances. We talk about MRSL. So that means they don't have any hazardous substance on the garment, nor does it leave it on the streams, nor into the air. So all perspective. So we talk about that 360. And then we talk about waste, right? So I talked about waste, where a lot of waste gets generated in textile. So we do, of course, recycling. Recycling is something which we have, have our own plants where we are doing recycling, and we do currently about 20% has a recycling which is there. So if you see the global average in terms of recycling, it's only 1% is basically recycled now. In terms of the number of fabric, which is a garment which has been done, most of them goes on landfill. About 5-10% of them are in India basically is still downcycled. But most of them are there. So these are various fundamentals. So I can, so
we'll come back.
Sure.
But it's a very challenging sector, and I know that if you are bringing any new innovation here, and especially you talked about recycle, I'll come back to you on that, because our biggest challenge is when we see monumental waste, even our own consumption story, because you will like us to buy more and more, and the fact is our own consumption story, we know it's now today's sign of, and this we are little diverting, it's a sign of being affluent, that I have a wardrobe which starts from one part and finishes to the other part, and half the stuff I don't use, or it goes to the basically to the dump yard straight away. So this is an area where a lot of issues will happen in future and water intensive, but thanks for your very clear message there. Sriram, will come to you. You represent a hardware industry. What are your general thoughts about this whole ESG, and also when it comes to technology, when it comes to the kind of computer society we have become now, and we will become more and more with AI coming, and the large supercomputers with energy guzzling periphery they will have, and I'm advising few of those clients, and I never thought that kind of audit will happen at the sourcing company end. These are the future challenges. Maybe they'll be bigger than apparel one day.
Wish you all a good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Sudhir. I think the way to look at a technology supply chain is to put into 3 large buckets. One is the sourcing part of it, and we as a tech distributor typically source from large global IT majors. And many of these, like Apple, Dell, HP, are extremely high on the maturity curve on sustainability journey in terms of using of zero plastics, a minimum number of components to be made out of recycled parts, and a whole lot of other things. So that's something which is getting taken care of at the manufacturing level. When you look at the second stage, which is supply chain level itself, which is actually transporting these products from the place of manufacture to the final place of use, that's where again a lot of efficiency should come in, which is coming in parts, and that's what we are also playing a role. Example, use of electric vehicles for fleets. How do you optimize on your fleet journey to make sure your carbon footprint is minimal on the planet? We have large warehouses to store these products, distribution centers. Should they be running on renewable energy or otherwise? So a whole lot of mapping has to be done in terms of the entire supply chain as to what are the elements of touch points on the planet Earth. But most importantly, what is largely today an informal sector is the last part as to what happens to the end of life products or the products that we are going to replace with newer ones. You mentioned about AI. When the AI refresh happens, obviously a lot of old PCs are going to get released. What next? So I think that we have a very important role to play from a circular economy perspective. How do we harness this safely? Try to elongate their life, not take them into landfill, or try to recycle them the last decimal and make sure that nothing gets gets into the landfill at all. So I think it's a whole lot of things to be done right across from the manufacturing till the last line of the circular economy.
Yeah, very well said. And I'll come to Marico now. Very interesting company, and I keep on reading. I shared with you, sir, Bipin sir, that I read so many stories, and I'm so grateful that the kind of companies which are here, they are the pride of this country. That's why I said the first word pride when I mentioned about Cipla. See, the fact is, you will talk a lot about the entire agriculture integration you were talking about. What is the Marico story for us to take inspiration from?
Yeah, thank you, Business World and organizing team to call me here. Now, before I think we get into this topic, I got you catch my attention by saying that I do not belong to any sector. So, yeah, while you are very modest to say that, but it's a great learning for a sustainability professional, because the general saying is that money is yours, but resources are of society. So a sustainability professional can belong to any sector. However, the impact you are creating, it is for the society. And then that's a lens I think one should use it, and it's a good learning. So thank you, Sudhir, for that. So coming to Marico, we are an Indian company. We are into beauty and wellness products. We are from last 30-40 years we are operating. India is a predominant business, while we also have operations in Bangladesh, Vietnam, Middle East, and South Africa. Now, if you look at the brands in India, Parachute and Safolo are the two most important brands. I think you should be aware of them if if you are doing well. So while the Parachute brand is for the coconut oil, and we are the largest you can say manufacturer of coconut oil in India. And if you look at the crushing capacities, probably we are the biggest in Asia also. So when we say like this, there is a moral accountability on Marico to work for the coconut sector, not only for the oil. So because coconut cultivation is happening for tender coconut oil, confectionaries, or eating at households also. So the entire coconut sector is important to work upon. So in 2016, we undertook a study to know that what is the best practice in coconut cultivation, and we observed surprisingly that our yield is lesser than yield in Indonesia, Philippines, or other South Asian countries. So we started a program called as Kalpariksha, where we are actually appointed agronomists who are trained on scientific cultivation of coconut. They are going to farms, doing assessment of their farms and providing them inputs for improving their overall productivity. And to our own surprise, we observed that the people who are practicing these things, they got productivity more than 15% as against the traditional practices, which is a direct benefit to them. I think Sriram was also talking about India landholding is very small, and then for such a small landholder, this impact is very big. We will discuss in details as we proceed.
Ruhana, I'll come back to you, and Um, I want to tell you that when we go to Medica or any place, sometime on legal conferences, and we see that Indian corporates, if we talk about it, steel is very respected, pharma is very respected. But now you have a vision for a global appetite being exported to the entire world. So, do you think the time has come that in sectors like pharmaceutical, your because when we say a topic like transparency and accountability, our biggest handicap is that the international ratings put India beyond 100 on most of these parameters. Nothing specific to a company or a sector or sustainability. Trust deficits are huge with regard to us. How do you go for your expansions with ESG parameters in mind and your storytelling capability that what you're doing is so empowering, which should be like a story like how iPhone does. They have a story. I don't think any other mobile phone has a story. I don't know the manufacturer's name, any one of them, Nokia, Samsung, OnePlus. I don't remember. Others might remember, but iPhone, every morning somebody will talk about Tim Cook and other guys. We have Tata has such a story. So, what is the Cipla's one thing on sustainability which you like to take it as a story and you want all of us to know?
Thank you. So, as you rightly said, the stricter regulations and the consumers' demands are also something which is demanding. And India is not judged on a scale, it is at a global level where all the companies, all the sectors are benchmarked at the same pace. And so, to keep up to that benchmark, definitely, and for example, and especially when you are selling your products in the geographies like European markets, where NHS is coming up with the requirements where they have their net zero commitment by 2040, and they want all the companies who are selling their pharma products there should embark on that journey. And you can't you're not allowed to sell products if you don't have a carbon reduction plan. These are the kind of things which the consumers are also demanding, and which we are also looking in our supply chain. So we have also started the physical assessment of our suppliers, and it is definitely a very complex supply chain and cost expensive and everything. But the sooner the better we get into this journey. And we have initiated this year the physical assessment. So around say 5% of our critical suppliers, and now we have also kept a target or the commitment for coming years, how we are going to increase the number of suppliers on their physical assessments. And not just doing the assessments and keeping it there, but also looking at who are the high or the critical risk suppliers for us, how we can have their mitigation plan and what they can be taking up in the short term and then in the long term. So they can also embark on this journey, and we are with them. So this is on the supplier piece is what Cipla is looking at, because we also have our commitments of carbon neutrality, water neutrality, and zero waste to landfill by 2025.
Yeah, very well said. Very well said. Srinivas, so apparel sector is a very exciting thing with whatever is happening in Bangladesh, and also at the same time when this started happening in Bangladesh and this sector, I'm working a little bit, so I know that China has come up with in last 4 weeks with series of regulations how they will be green, completely green on apparel sector or textiles. They never cared about it earlier, and how you see that as a threat, and what are the handicaps of our own supply chain in India, where we are even compared with that Vietnam now, which is a very new competition for. I'm not talking about bigger players like you. I'm talking about the middle level export houses and others. So where are we? So far, India's perception is concerned, what we should do to seize the opportunity and be a dominant player in this sector?
You talked about China. The world is running away because there is Zhejiang cotton which is actually there. So in fact, there is a lot of regulations against it. So you need to actually, that's where the traceability part is actually coming in. So the cotton grown from this region is banned. by all the brands. So you need to, I mean, they're going to geotag as well, and then going to be traceability. So that's a completely no. So China is, that's where basically, I mean, I should not be, but that's how it is. So there are certain cottons are banned, and that's where the traceability piece is very, very important. And I think they've moved from there as well. So their only bigger piece is in the renewable sector, where they've gone large scale in terms of their. So that's the good piece which is there. So where India is also is going to go in a big way. You talked about Bangladesh. Bangladesh a story where when there was a team from Bangladesh coming and visiting our factories, and when we told that we use recycled water into our processes, they were shocked basically. I mean, how can you use this recycled water into
Because
this
they
thing,
put everything
right?
in the stream.
It goes into the stream, and we, I mean, there are people talking about Bangladesh being a sustainable. Unfortunately, no.
No, they are not.
They don't even know. I mean, it should not, right? So, the water goes directly, because abundant amount of water is available. So they say there is a lot of water available, so it goes into the stream. So there is no treatment of water. But India is far ahead in terms
Yes.
of this recycling. You talk about. I'm not talking about just Arvind.
I'm making
Yeah,
it
please.
exciting
Yeah,
for
sure.
You are mirroring somebody. So I was speaking to somebody 2 hours back, and he's based in Amsterdam. He's an expert of your sector, green story I'm talking about. They said that our Indian companies, and just because he's from Kerala originally, but he just said our Indian companies, they are shy about showing how good they are actually. They are so good on compliances, on water uses, and even to compare them to Bangladesh is an insult, I will say today.
No, absolutely right. Absolutely right. I mean, story where Tirupur you talked about, right? Tamil Nadu immediately banned any without a ZLD, the factory could be put in place. So, I mean, India is far ahead in water treatment in that area. So, sorry, I think the other
You talked about other countries also, the rest of the countries which are our competition on the export of textiles.
Yeah. So you also talked about in terms of how we can actually prepare to be better. What's
Dominant-
lacking and what can be done.
Dominant.
Yeah. So one thing where we have to kind of do is basically put the supply chain on track, right? So our supply chain now is very unorganized. So we need to kind of have traceability into the supply chain as well. So compliance and traceability in the supply chain, which needs to be kind of mapped into the entire source. So what we do, for example, is we do a supply chain traceability, we do a product traceability as well. So that means we know every, for example, any garment which is actually being done, where exactly, who was the farmer, who was the engineer, who was the entire supply chain is mapped in, and we actually go deep down in terms of understanding whether they are compliant as well. So that traceability is what we do. I mean, we talked about basically when you talk about organic or any of these, we give transaction certificates basically, but then we actually ensure that it is right. And then these are all now using blockchain technologies are also used now for kind of tracking this entire mass balancing happening as well. So I think these technology could be a big enabler, and people, larger apparel manufacturers can actually enable the entire supply chain in India to be more transparent. And
Thank you, Sriram. Your observations. How do you feel? You talked about the larger issues which are coming our way. Your sector, specifically, we talk about hardware, software, or India's technology age. Do we have an opportunity here for putting transparency and accountability and be the world leaders on ESG supply chain in your sector?
I think definitely yes. On the last leg of the supply chain I mentioned to you on the circular economy, a disproportionate part of the business today happens in the informal sector, with little information on traceability, on what happens and what doesn't happen. So our ability as a country, as responsible institutions, to convert this informal sector into formal sector by bringing in regulated practices, I think it will be a very important step. And there is enough and more potential to make this happen.
Bipin sir, I will ask you to go little detail now. Marico, after Tata's, I think Marico has stories which became very relatable, especially the entire cat and mouse stuff. That how the you are aware about it? That how the coconut jar of Marico was made so that it can't be destroyed or it can't leak. So he will tell about that, because that's also a supply chain issue. And also, what are the big initiatives Marico has taken apart from the agriculture on women you talked about? Because when we say ESG, you know, one common mistake we do when we do ESG, we think it's about environment. It's actually about social also. and in a very deep sense for India, Bangladesh. Most of the ESG failure on Bangladesh has happened on the social part actually, because of whatever child labor issues were there or the women related issues there. I think we have sorted the S in India in a very, very good manner, whether it is the posh laws or the laws with regard to the leaves for women and the child labor, which most of the state governments were absolutely committal about it, that we will not allow child labor. We have done great work on the S factor. I think G is something where a lot of work has to happen, where the corruption and the government intervention and licensing and the entire advocacy and policy part is there, the G part. We need a lot of work. E is also quite sorted, I believe, because we are very responsible. I know this sector well, that how courts have treated. I think we have been very, very active, that we are absolutely sacrosanct. Tell me if you have gone to a national park, a wildlife sanctuary, to see a tiger. Anybody has gone here? Any tiger reserve? Ranthambore, Corbett? Have you seen anybody getting down off the vehicle, taking out samosas, putting chairs, eating? Possible? Not possible. You cannot get down from your vehicle even. How did we do that? We don't do it in aircraft, where all of us pounce on the pilot, allow us to get out of the aircraft first when the plane stops, right? We all want to get out immediately. So we as a nation have succeeded also at many places. So sir, you share some of these stories which are like good stories for us to take home.
I echo what you said, is there's a good progress which are done. At the same time, there's a huge work to be done as a country. While I say that, there is a big change which I observe in the country. Maybe if 1 year before, one generation before, we actually do not have money to spend and waste. And that's the reason we are actually far more efficient in material consumption per capita. However, as the GDP is growing, there is a surplus amount of money people are going to have at hand. And that's where the morality will
here
come
I
to
will
play.
pause you. The banks are running after everybody that please give us some deposit. We have become so adventurous in such a short term. Everybody has gone to stock market now.
So that's the area where I think we need to play a role, where how you reach out to a smaller person, a small entrepreneur or a small farmer, so that you actually start, or he was also talking about that, how you ensure that whatever their good practices are there, they are formalized, reaching to more people. And if you wanted to intend to reach out to them, how you build trust and ensure that what you want to drive, they accept it in a positive manner. So there's some good work which we did in, again, and I'll talk about the coconut farming, because this is the area where a lot of work is done. Almost 2009, 7, 8, 9, these 3 years, we took a lot of efforts to set up our collection centers. Because what we observed is that coconut tree life is around 70 to 80 years. So which means that the tree is going to yield with 3 generations. And they are on the periphery of the farms. So however, maybe the professional farmer, the coconut tree, there are chances that it will get neglected or it will be a side business. And it will not be a big big material to sell with certain positions. So there are many cases where people come with 50 nuts, 100 nuts, 200 nuts like this. So we wanted to create an opportunity where a farmer who is having maybe a half-acre farm or 1 acre farm can actually come to Marico and sell. And then he gets a very transparent treatment and governance in the overall commercial transaction. He should feel that even though I'm selling 1 coconut, I know what is the cost. So what we created from there, I think I'm talking about 12, 13 years before, we digitize the collection center. So any farmer who is coming with whatever the quantity they have, there is a pictorial, they can see what is the quality. If this is the quality, the rate is displayed by Marico. So the person knows that this is the rate for this quality. Once the person actually sells it, on his mobile, the person gets that this much material is bought by Marico and this much money is deposited in your account. So the person is actually feeling so you can say trustworthy, that the overall business is very transparent. And then slowly we started using this collection center to develop traceability of material, to educate people that this is a good practice which you have to follow. If there are say 50 farmers who are coming to sell at one collection center, we'll pick up one guy, develop a model farm and then ask everybody to come there and then have a training on those things. So idea is that we need to reach out to a very small person. Even last 3-4 years, we have started something called as agribusiness center. Every farmer needs certain labor, money or machinery to do farming, but they do not have money to do that. So we actually give at very minuscule, you can say, financial cost that money to them, so that they can set up those businesses related to pesticides, machinery, etc., and then they can take that forward.
Very sustainable. Yeah. Thank you. So I'll just like to say that we saw a McKinsey report in 2020 which talked about that people and consumer wants to spend more if you reduce your packaging. And this was a starting point for few of the companies I work with, and they started going for reduced packaging, and that was the time pandemic had kicked in. And you won't believe, India is amongst few nations where all the e-commerce companies now are being regularly sent school representations that we have ordered, or my father had ordered, or my mother has ordered. And whether it's a food thing, I'm not taking anybody's name, whether it's this thing, or whether a driver who is coming from the wrong side and the child is observing that from the window that every third day that driver is violating the red light, from this multinational e-commerce company, which takes pride in putting best practices forward. And then he writes a mail to them without copying to anybody. And those things have triggered a revolution in India. No other country has done that. Nobody questions these things. And we have questioned in our country those things. So it's not like we are a nation, we sometimes underestimate ourselves. I'll give you the last piece. In 2005, a film photographer who was very famous for recording clandestine wildlife photography, he went to the agriculture fields of South India and he filmed the dying Nevla, the mongoose. Nevla बहुत शुभ मानते हैं कहीं दिख जाए. So he was being told that repeatedly large numbers of mongoose is being killed. So he used to do those filming. So he made a 9-minute film on mongoose killing. And mongoose were beaten with bats, dandas, hockey sticks, mudang, all kind of stuff. And they were killed in an organized manner. Pura vyapar tha. And that movie was shown to me. I was shocked to see that. And then we went behind it. We realized that basically the paint brush industry uses it for the best painting brushes which all the famous painters used to use. Very exclusive, very costly. And then we went after this, we realized we are not succeeding. We went to schools and the schools sent 6,000 postcards to Delhi High Court. They took a sumo motu petition. Mongoose was not protected. It was in Schedule 3 of Wildlife Protection Act. It was promoted in 3 months' time to Schedule 1, Part 1 of the Wildlife Protection Act, which has the protection for tiger and the elephants. And mongoose is protected forever in India. So I have seen those stories happening. I'm very confident that this panel was so sincere and it must have given you something to take back from this conference. And I'm grateful for the opportunity. All of you heard us patiently. Thank you.